So another thing about Rav Wolbe is that everything in his book is extremely practical. That was his chiddush, that was his insight that he brought into Musar, is that it's all filled with steps and exercises, practical steps how to grow spiritually, which is very, very interesting. Again, I've learned a lot of Musar in my life, and I've never seen that approach in other Musar works. So that's also, and on the other hand, it gives, it kind of requires of us to try to do something, because he gives exercises and to try to put some of it into practice. But it's a real plan on how to grow spiritually, like very, very concrete steps on how to grow spiritually. Okay, so so let's take it away. Those who don't have text, I think there's some more over here somewhere, yeah. And it's in a modern Hebrew. Rav Wolbe put his work in modern Hebrew, which is interesting. I always felt that it should be in English. So I actually contacted the family after he was already passed away. I contacted the family about putting it into English. So I didn't have time myself to do it, but I would have found someone to do it, to translate into English, because there's really nothing like it in English. That's, you see a lot of people, again, I'm not putting anything down, but people learning, Rav Arush, Shlomo Arush's books, what do they call it, Garden of Peace and Garden of this, because there's really nothing in English that's a concrete step-by-step growth to spiritual greatness. And I figured if we had this, that'd be it. Everyone would be, everybody learning it. So I contacted the family, and I asked them, could we translate it into English? I'll find somebody, and I'll oversee it. I'll go through it. I'll, make sure it's okay. And they said the Rav didn't want anything in English. So I figured, okay. So that's the end of that. I was about to hang up the phone. They said, wait a minute. They said, you can put out a book based on his thought. You can put on a book, it doesn't have to translate it, he didn't want to translate it. Put on a book based on Rav Wolbe's thought, So I said, so you're asking me to be the Shabbos goy, right? I mean, he didn't want it, right? So for whatever reason, he didn't want it. I don't know why. I don't know why he didn't want it in English, but he didn't. And I certainly was not going to be the Shabbos goy and put it based on his thought, even though he didn't really want it. So this is what we have. So it's in a modern Hebrew, and I'll translate. Okay, but I'm not going to be working on the skills much, because I want to work more on the concepts. Okay, so this is entitled, this whole piece of work is entitled Hakpada, being strict on other people. So he gives an introduction here. Anochiyut, selfishness, being self-centered. Kas, anger. V'chipus kavod, and looking for honor. Hey midos ra'ois, they are bad character traits. We know those are bad character traits. You don't need any, advanced Talmudics to know that these are bad things. Chesed, right? Kindness, savlanos, patience, which we will get to. We'll do a whole, I don't know if you guys know, but next month I'll also be teaching Musar, right? So the savlanos is one of the main midos in Musar, patience, and we have to understand what that means. What is patience? Zehirus, being watchful or careful. Bekavad chabrios, with other people. Hein midos tovas, these are good character traits. Zeboror lekol adam, that is clear to every single person. So in other words, you open up a classical Musar book, there's going to be things about anger, there's going to be things about running after glory, there's going to be things about ego, there's going to be things about patience, there's going to be things about kindness. That's all going to be in there, right? Hakpada, but being strict. Kimat eino nichneses l'suga midos b'nei abrios. It practically doesn't even enter in to the midos in the eyes of people. And when he talks about eyes of people, he's talking about B'nai Torah. He's talking about people that, are in the world of Torah and trying to grow. You ask the average person, is there a midah called akpada? They're going to go, I don't know. If you're going to say there's a midah called, self-centered or gaiva or animal drives taiva or something like that, everyone's going, yeah, sure, I know about that. But this midah is practically not recognizable. He nir'es kedguva hechrachit umutzteki. You know why people don't know about it? Because it appears to be tguva as a reaction, which is necessary and correct. Yeah? People look at the fact that you're makpid. Somebody does you a bad turn or somebody disappoints you. It's normal. So you just kind of judge them. Boom, makpid, boom, boom, without even being aware of it. And we think that, okay, that's life. That's what life is. Right? He's about to say, no, it's not. Achazal milamdim osanu acheres. Our sages teach us a different way to be. Now he's going to go through some passages of the sages that we don't want to have this character trait. This is something we want to try to get away from, yeah, which is hard. You know, someone does you a bad turn, someone does something you don't like, that you don't judge him, that you don't feel anything bad in your heart against him. It's not easy, right? Anyone thinks that's easy is fooling himself. It's not so easy, yeah? Okay, so let's get into it. And more, where the hurt was more, it's hard to let go. That's even harder to let go. Okay, let's get into some examples here. Shalu Talmidav es Rav Ada bar Ava. His students asked Rav Ada bar Ava the following: Bama hirachta yomim. Why did you merit a long life? Why were you married? Why did you merit to live a long life? Amar lehem, he said back, Miyamai, all of my days, lo hikpadati betoch beisi. I was never strict in my house. Unbelievable. Here's a message, guys. I mean, eventually all you guys are going to want to get married. He never was strict in his house, not with his wife, not with his children, right? If he had to discipline, he had to discipline, okay, but there was nothing in his heart. He never had bad feelings in his heart, not towards his wife, not towards his kids. He was never makpid. And that's how he was meritorious to live a long life. Yeah? Example number 2. Yeah, Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. Amar Rava, says Rava, Kol hamavir al midosav. Yeah, this is a big thing to prepare for Yom Adin, to prepare for Rosh Hashanah. Anyone who passes over his character traits. So what does that mean? Mavir and lo al kol pshav, a Kodesh Baruch Hu takes away all of his sins. Right? He passes over his character. So we'll have to see what that means. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, noisei avan v'over al pesha. One, Hashem carries the sins, and he passes over the avon is pesha is unintentional, is intentional. Avon is not intentional. Lemi nosei avon. Who does Hashem carry his sin? Lo'oiver al pesha, to one who passes over what's done to him. Rashi says, Hamavir midosav. What does it mean to give over on your midos? She'eno medaktek limdod mida limitztayren oso. Rashi says he's not exacting to measure out those who cause him pain. Umaniach midosav v'holech lo. He leaves aside that measuring out and he goes. Right? So someone causes you pain. Instead of measuring out, he did this, and he did that, and he did this, and she did that, and he did this, and he did that, and I'm going to, remember it, and I'm going to hold on to it, and whatever. No, he passes through it. He passes through it, he lets it go. Now, obviously, this is a hard thing to do. I mean, some people do nasty stuff, right? I mean, we have to think about how we're going to, how's this work in practice. But this is definitely, you see from our sages, this is something you want to get to. This is something you want to get to, right? If you can. Right? It doesn't mean, the Christians say, turn the other cheek. No, turn the other cheek is ridiculous. Right? Turn the other cheek is ridiculous. That's to say like he's always right. No, he's not always right. He did something wrong. He hurt you. And that, you don't hold on to it. So that's what we're trying to get to here. Okay? So you pass through the midah, you don't measure it out. Kamo ein ma'avirin ala mitzvahs, just like you don't pass over mitzvahs. Ein ma'avirin ala ochlin, you don't walk over food. Manichin v'hoylech lo, Rashi says, you leave it and you keep going. So how do you leave it? That's what all these vadim are going to be about. How do you leave it? Someone hurts you, someone does something against you. How do you walk away from it? Yeah, that's really the work we're going to be doing here, right? And I think that's very applicable for this time of year, when the whole Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash, was destroyed because of hatred. Okay. Last Chazal, Gemara in Shabbos. Yeah? Tana Rabbanim, Abraisa. L'oilam ye'odem an vasan kehillel. Yeah? A person should be humble like Hillel, the great Hillel. V'al yehei kaptan keshamai. He should not be strict like Shammai. Yeah? Okay? So we have 3 Gemaras that being makpid on people is not good, right? You got to let go. You have to let go. The first Gemara is how Ravada Barava was able to live a long life. The second Gemara is how we can be zocha on Rosh Hashanah to a good judgment. And the third Gemara is telling us we should follow in the footsteps of Hillel and not like Shammai. Okay, so let's just finish the Akdama, and we can talk a little bit. Yeah? V'kovat hakpada la'atzma madur miyuchat. And this hakpada has its own special edition. Ab shehi lechora me'anfei akas. So you could say that being makbid is related to anger, right? Couldn't you say that logically? It's related to anger. If you're makbid on someone, you blow up, yeah? So you could say that it's related to anger. Hakas hi hit partsut bazam. Anger is when you blow up in anger, right? Achi eno mishira roishin belev akasan. But it doesn't leave an image in the heart of the one who got angry. In other words, when you get angry, it kind of like you let off the steam, and there's nothing left. You don't feel anything heavy in your heart afterwards. Vulai hu mischaret achar kach al hitpartsut. And maybe he even regrets afterwards that he blew up like that. Lo chein akpada. When you're makbid on someone, it's not like that. Hu shemura heite believe. It's hidden, it's watched over inside of his heart. Vulai bichlal eino nikeret bachutz, and nobody outside is even going to see it. So in other words, in one area, hakpada is actually worse than getting angry. Right? Chazal say getting angry is terrible. And there's something, we'll talk about that too. We'll have a whole, next man, we'll have a whole series of vadim on the whole idea of getting angry and why you shouldn't get angry. But the hakpada has a disadvantage because hakpada stays in. Once you blow up, you blow up. Yeah? People that blow up, usually 2 seconds later, they want to be your best friend, They even feel bad over the fact they blew up like that. But when you're makbid about somebody, it stays, and it stays, and it festers inside. And you can't even see it on the outside. Aval hi mikarsemet belev yoter v'yoter. It's like woven in the heart more and more. Ubameshach hasman, as time goes on, hi alula lehafech lesina mamish. It can turn into real hatred. That's why I wanted to do these vadim now. Because hakpada, when you're makbid on someone and you don't deal with it, eventually you could come to hate the person. Right? And that's why the Beis HaMikdash, if the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed because of hatred, right? So that means that to fix it up, we got to get out of this stuff. We got to stop hating each other. Yeah. So this can turn into, once you're makbid on somebody, it can turn into hatred. Vas bekocha ligrom diburim umasim noroim, and it has the ability to cause words and actions that are horrible. Nora really means awesome, but in a bad sense here. You could, when you got all that stuff inside, it can blow up and really be bad. It can really lead to bad things. Totza miyadit achas yesh la lefamim. So what's one of the results that you can see sometimes? Mafsikim lidaber im zeh shemakpidim elav. You stop speaking to the guy that you're makpid on. Give him the silent treatment. You know that one, yeah? You don't talk to the guy. You see him in the hallway, you slip away from him, You give him the silent treatment, right? So that's one thing that can happen when you're makbid on a person. I can't stand this guy. So then you just avoid him. You don't talk to him, right? Mishnah b'Sanhedrin, Perek Gimel Kovat. There's a Mishnah in Sanhedrin, the third Perek, that establishes soiner, a person that. What is the definition of hating someone? Kol shelo diber emo gimel yamim be'eva. You didn't speak to him for 3 days. So the Mishnah in Sanhedrin defines that's what hatred is. You see a guy, you don't talk to him for 3 days. You try to avoid him, That is the definition of hating somebody. Revolted in another place, he says an interesting thing. He says something even more profound. He says, at least if you get mad at a guy and you confront him, you're acknowledging his existence. But if you give him the silent treatment, you're saying you don't exist. Yeah, it's actually worse in a lot of ways. You give a guy a silent treatment, you're saying you don't even exist. I don't even see you. I don't even hold of you at all. So that's really so this hakpada can really turn into bad stuff. Hare lo ledaber machmas eva. You don't talk to the guy because you don't like him. Hikfar sina mamish. That the Mishnah is defining, that is the definition of hatred. Yeah? And the Torah says, Al tisnas es achicha bilvavecha. You're not allowed to hate a Jew in your heart. So that is a big thing. Right? Okay. So let's finish the introduction, and then we can, maybe guys have questions, you want to talk a little bit. Hine kas, behold anger. Tzrichim v'yicholim lichvosh. You must, and you're able to conquer. Look, if a guy blows up all the time, no one's going to take him seriously. Right? At least in Torah circles. Maybe in the world at large, people that blow up all the time, maybe they're successful, right? I don't know. But in Jewish circles, a guy who blows up all the time, it looks at him like, what is this guy's a clown? What? So you have to control your anger. If your guy's walking around, we've had guys in yeshiva with anger problems, and everyone's like, they don't want to go near the person. Like, what kind of person is this, So that you have to, and you're able to. Anger is something you can learn how to control. Yeah? Mishu hu adam, if a person's human, kovesh kaso, he has to conquer his anger. Hakpada, but this idea of being makbid on people, tzrichim lefoirer, you have to crumble it up. Ad sheyesara min alev, until you get it out of your heart. Ze harbe yoter kasher. This is much harder. Because it's inside. Right? It's inside. I mean, again, I think I'm giving a shmooze to the whole yeshiva on Sunday. I want to talk a little bit about the first temple and the second temple and the differences between them and the averas that were done in each temple. But, the first temple, the averas were more on the outside. They did idolatry, they did, illicit relations, they did shvichas dam, there was murder, there were more external things. The second base of Mishnah, the hatred it's inside. It's in the heart. So that's much trickier stuff. So you have to try to get it out of the heart, which is hard work. Yeah? Lasir kpeda me'alev, to get this hakpada out of the heart, he me'avodas hakoshos shebemikdash. These are from the hardest types of service in the mikdash. So what is he saying mikdash for? Because we're like a beis hamikdash. Each person's like a beis hamikdash. So that's from the hardest thing, because your heart is like the kodesh kadoshim. It's like the Holy of Holies, and to get that out of there, get that dirt out of there, that hakpada, that hatred, is a lot of work. That's what we're going to be talking about in the Vadim. Okay. Questions or comments? Yeah? Pretty heavy stuff. So you see, this hakpada is not a simple thing. Yeah? And he's going to show us that we're makbid tens of times a day. It's fascinating. Guy does something, boom. Guy does something, boom. Yeah, we do it all the time. It's very fascinating that how often, and then, and if a guy does something a few times, then you really develop a hakpada on him, The guy who takes a shower and he doesn't clean up after himself in the dorms, or the guy, that cuts in front of you in line when you're, waiting in the cheder ochel for whatever it is, These things happen, Yeah, your chavrusa shows up late, There's all kinds of things you can have hakpada. The guy in class asks stupid questions, there's always a lot of things, Guy who's too loud, guy doesn't talk enough. You can always come up with a million things, you know what I'm saying? Okay, I'm just throwing things out there, right? Maybe these things might happen to you. Yeah, thoughts or ideas? I mean, we haven't really gotten warmed up yet, but... Yeah, Jacob.
How do you differentiate between something that, needs to be talked through and something that you just let go?
I mean, that you have to confront the guy.
Yeah.
So I think that'll hopefully be cleared up. There is a mitzvah in the Torah of tochacha, to give reproof. When you have to give reproof, when you have to get let go. So that's it's something we're going to have to learn how to do. There are times you have to give reproof. There are times you have to let go. So you can't just let go every time. There's a mitzvah in the Torah of reproof. So so we'll have to. I would say, like I say, how many vadim are there here? These are vadim that he said every week. So we're going to be doing them every day, which is a certain disadvantage, because like during the whole week they would work on this stuff. So we're going to be going quicker, but like I said, whatever you can jump onto, you try to jump onto. But so there's 7 vadim here. So if we don't have clarity, we'll talk more about that. Yeah.
Until it reaches the level of where tochacha is necessary,
What? Yeah. Exactly. It's here and here. Exactly. Exactly. Which means it's a lot of work here. There's a lot of work involved. If it's tochacha, then it involves another person. You have to give him reproof. But giving reproof in our generation is very complicated because most people can't handle it. So if you're giving reproof in this generation, you have to think carefully. Is it going to be heard? Are they going to accept it? And the only thing you have to give reproof is something explicit in the Torah. Right? That's Perchas Yom Kippur, the Mishnah Berurah brings. So if it's explicit in the Torah, it's like, okay, did you turn on a fire on Shabbos? You know what I mean? It's not, there's not that many things which are explicit in the Torah. Many things are rabbinic or learned out in the Gemara. So and it also has to be the person's going to listen to you. If they're not going to listen to you, there's no point. I once asked my Rebbe Shlita, I asked him, even if it's something explicit in the Torah, the guy's not going to listen to you. Do you have to give him reproof? He said, nah. So, in many cases, people, you give a guy reproof, he's going to, who are you? Yeah, you big tzaddik over here, you know what I mean? So it has to be thought through carefully. I like to tell guys that, I'm married now, Bli Ayin Har, 43 years. I think I've given my wife reproof 5 times. Yeah, you have to think it through. Reproof is a heavy thing. You have to make sure that it's something that, you really need to speak out, and it's important to speak out. It's a dangerous thing. We had a guy, when I was a Bachar in Yeshiva, there was a guy, I learned with him, we were chavrusas, and he was always giving everyone reproof. And after a while, I couldn't learn with the guy. It was just like, it was unpleasant. And he ended up learning by himself. No one would learn with him. And he was great. He was so good in learning. I mean, he was fantastic. He was a great chavrusa. But it was just so unpleasant, this guy always complaining about me, complaining about this guy. I couldn't handle it after a while. And nobody, even though he was such an extremely talented guy, he sat by himself, So, you got to be careful. You have to be careful when, where, how. But there is sometimes you have to. Yeah. Liam, you had something?
Just based on that idea of reproof, obviously you shouldn't be the guy that is being mucking on people and trying to give them this total. But where does that tendency of people to become so defensive, where is that deriving from? What's the root of that tendency to be like, to shout back, even if it's coming from a place that you're trying to help?
So again, that's why, listen, again, now I'm in a wider role in yeshiva, but when I was, here in the saddle for 28 years, so guys would come to Bachar and come to me, oh, Bachar X did this. Yeah? Should it be approached? Should it be addressed? And many of the time I just said to the Bachar, I said, where you're coming from, that's a problem. Where he's coming from, no. He's not holding. I'll just leave it. Because, everyone's different. Where they're holding spiritually, where they're holding in their midos. And so, that's where a person will listen depends on the person, depends on who he is. And that's why giving reproof is a very tricky thing. That's why with women, it's harder for them to hear reproof. So I always advise people in marriage, just stay out of that. But when you're dealing with Bachrim, some Bachrim will welcome it, and some Bachrim won't. And to be aware of the fact that, especially if there's not a great relationship, when a Bachar knows you really care about him, he's more likely to hear it. But you come around, you haven't even had anything to do with the guy, or and he's a new guy in yeshiva. Yeah, you said the bracha wrong. The guy, I'm just saying, the guy may react in a very negative way. If he knows you care about him and you're good friends, and he knows you want to help him and to do the right thing, he'll be more open to it. So it's really sizing up the situation. But the underlying principle is: are they going to accept it in a good way and in an accepting way? That's really the bottom. That's the bottom line. But we'll get to all these issues. I mean, that's part of these vadim here, is to try to figure that stuff out. Okay, are we ready to start? Let's get in. Let's start getting in there. Okay, vad rishon. Misha enu sam lev la'atzmo enu margish klal bikpedo shalo. Person that does not pay attention to himself, he won't even feel that he's being makbid on people. Hen kot vius upashutois etzlo. They are so natural and so simple by him. Yeah? Shumiskasha lekfoa ki amnam hu makbid al mishu. He has difficulty even establishing that he's being makbid on someone. Rak al yedei simat leiv. This is the first step, boys. Right? Only by paying attention. Namod alakpedo shalano will we be able to establish that we're being makbid. Right? It has to be, first step, being aware. Awareness. That's the first exercise he's going to give us. Just being aware the times during the day when we're makbid on people. Because most of the time we're not even aware of it. You know, a guy blows up, you're aware you blew up, right? It may happen every once a week, once every 2 weeks, you blow up. You know and you remember you blew up, right? Or, somebody asked you to do a chesed and you refused, you didn't want to do it. You remember that. These things are so subtle and they happen so often that you're not even aware that it's there. Aval az nivakach lirois, but we're going to be forced to see ki yitachin, that it's possible she'asaros pa'amim b'yom, tens of times a day, notzeres banu kpeda is formed within us as being makbid. It can happen tens of times a day that you're makbid on people, right? It can happen. It's going to give examples, and you're going to go, oh yeah, I get that one. Sure, I got it. It can happen. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Ilazos, if this is so, Zoe aschalas islamdus. Revolted always is very practical. This is the beginning of how we're going to practice here. When he uses the word islamdus, he means he's going to give us exercises. This is how we're going to get going over here and start dealing with this midah. Yeah? This is how we get going here. Shenikva latzmeinu. We're going to establish for ourselves zman shel dakois mitzpar, a time of several minutes, b'kol yom, every single day, shebo nayin, that we're going to look into im amnam nisaru lanak peidos b'meshach hayom, if was awoken in us being makpid during the course of the day. So in other words, he's saying take a few minutes out of the day and go through your day. Go through your day and see, was I makpid on anyone during the course of the day or not? Right? Cheshbon nefesh, I guess, take an accounting of yourself and go through your day and say, was I makpid, shachris? Was I makpid on anyone? The guy next to me was davening too loud. I'm just throwing out things, things that get me nervous, right? Or, the shliach tzibur davening too fast, or he davening too slow, or, whatever it is. Then go through the next thing, breakfast, anything happened at breakfast, back in the room, yeah? Shir, get a shir in the morning, go through the whole day and see, was I makpid during the course of the day over anything? Kviyas zos, this establishing this time, Yecholin lios bekesher im seder musar o bahaschalasoi, right? It could be together with your learning musar or at the beginning. Now, this is in FFB yeshivas, boys. In FFB yeshivas, you know how they learn musar? You know how they learn musar in FFB yeshivas? Yeah, no. You know what they learn in FFB yeshivas? They don't learn musar. Right? They call it Yizkor. Yizkor, you have on the Chagim, when the people say that whole ceremony for the departed parents. So, the guys who lost their parents have to stay inside. And most of the congregation leaves. And you feel bad for the people stuck inside. So that's the joke about Musar in the FFB yeshivas. It's like Yizkor, A few guys stay in there and everybody else is gone, So it's sad because I think if they learn the way we learned, with a Rav, I think there'd be much more people learning Musar. But because you put the poor kid, 16, 17-year-old, and put him a Sukkah Sharm in front of him, he has no idea what to do with it, right? So but in the times of Revolve, more people learn Musar. Certainly in his yeshiva, Ber Yaakov, they all learn Musar because of his influence. They all used to learn Musar. So he's saying, do this together with your Musar Seder. And that's impossible here, because as soon as Rabbi walks out, I walk in. So that's not going to work. So you have to find time during the day that you devote to this exercise. Okay? Yachol liyos shebeshvu harishon. Listen what he's going to say here. Fascinating. It could be that in the first week you do this, lo nimsa kol kpeda. You won't find anything. You're going to go through your day and say, I wasn't makpid. What does he want from my life, right? You might get the first week, you might say there's nothing there. Rak b'meshech hazman, as time goes on, nargish, we start feeling, ki amnam kain hikpadnu kama pamim biyom. We're going to start feeling that we were strict a few times a day. L'rov al dvarim tanim, and for the majority, it's just little things. What are examples? Mishu tafas makom yakvua. somebody took my fixed place, whether for learning or for davening. You walk in there, whoop, there's some guy sitting in your place. Yeah, no, you never had that one before. Yeah, it's not geschmack. It's not so geschmack. Yeah, so you walk in there and the guy takes your place, right? So that could be an example. Yeah, mi shebo acharai zinek lefanai l'autobus. Or you're waiting for a bus patiently, like a nice, chutz la'aretz person, waiting, and then this guy shoots in front of you, and takes your spot. He's going to get the seat before you get the seat, Okay? Mishahu lo ana ba'adivus al sheilasi ukadome. Or somebody didn't answer my question, right? In a nice way. You got this thing, you go into some kind of office here, you say, hello, you're busy with the phone. Hello, and then finally, you get their attention. You say, "How much does this cost?" No, and so you get one of those exchanges. So I'm just saying these kind of things can happen constantly. Upamim koresh mishu nasan liakitza, and sometimes it can happen that someone gives you, an akitza is a sting, like a bee gives you a sting. So somebody gives you a sting. Someone's, bachrim, they give you a little zets, somebody says, I'm talking about physical, I'm talking about emotional, somebody says something you don't like, right? But talk sichas reim, a bunch of guys are sitting around schmoozing, and some guy kind of gives you one, he says something, not so flattering to you, yeah? Zoi kvar kpeda yoter amuka. That's obviously something that is more deep. In other words, the first three are lighter. Right? If you're talking about somebody taking your place in the shul, or you're talking about someone who jumps ahead of you on the bus, or you're in a store and they don't answer you nicely, those are lighter things, right? One of your friends gives you a little, insult or something like that, that's a little tougher. Okay? And so really, the first step he's saying is take a few minutes a day, 3, 4. Rav Wolbe always in Musar, his approach is small is better, right? People always want to hit home runs. They go, I'm going to change and I'm going to be the best. And, and then, 2 weeks later, you give up everything because it's impossible. Spiritual growth is slow and steady and small steps. So that's his approach is small steps, baby steps, a few minutes a day. And go over how many times I was makpid on other people. Im Tomar, ask Rav Wolbe, Mali litzara zois. Why should I be looking at this horrible situation here? Lechapes bekirbi, to look into myself. Kpedos, for times I was makpid. V'lios modelem, and know about them. Mutav shelo argish behem klal. It's better I shouldn't feel it at all. In other words, why do I need this for? I'm like seeing all this ugliness in myself, and I'm makpid on this one, I'm makpid on that guy. Well, leave the whole thing alone. Live and let live, right? What's going on here? Akvar limud osanu harambam. Beravia mishmonas haprakim. Famous book written by the Rambam, Shmona Prakim, which was an introduction to Pirkei Avos. And the Rambam writes over there, Ki heder hergosha becherpa uvuz hura. If you do not feel negativity, cherpa and booze is like negativity, yeah? Hurrah, that's a bad thing. Lack of awareness is the worst thing in a human being, right? Yeah, it may be painful looking at this stuff. You're right. You're going to be painful looking. I was makpid here, I was makpid there, I judge this one, I judge that one. But lack of awareness is even worse. That's the worst thing, not to be aware of what's going on with ourselves. V'zeu me'atoyot midos. That's one of the worst things in midos. If you're not aware of yourself, you might think that if you're an extreme in a certain mitzvah, you might think midah, in a certain character trait is in an extreme, you might think it's good. V'yomeru al pachos hanefesh, and you're going to say of a guy that's, the Rambam has his own language here, which is sometimes hard to decipher. Pachos hanefesh is a person that he doesn't react to anything. You're going to say who's savlan, that he has patience. Right? You see a guy never reacts. Everyone is all excited around him. He's like, So you're going to say, wow, he's mastered patience. No, he's just brain dead. He's not emotionally in touch with himself. That's all. Yeah? So to be unaware is not a good thing. But al ha'atzel, you see a lazy guy, So what are you going to say about him? He's sameach bechalko. He's happy with his portion. You're going to say that, like, he's lazy. He doesn't do anything. Oh, I see. He's always besimcha, right? Al hanedar hergish v'hanois le'ovi tiv'av hu nizar klomer yirei chet. And then you're going to say a guy that doesn't want to have any benefit from this world, any pleasure from this world, because of his thick nature, you're going to say that he has fear of God. Ayin Sham, look in the Rambam. Yeah? So the Rambam's saying it's not good to be unaware. Even if it hurts a little bit, you want to be aware of what's happening with yourself. The whole idea of Musar is to be aware. Be aware of what's going on, and not to be living in some kind of a delusion, that there's no problems there. Yeah? Bardas continues Rav Wolbe, and we'll finish in a minute because we want to get to Mincha. Eino yochol lahashlim im tayot ke'ele. A person that has seichel cannot come to terms or be at peace with these kind of mistakes. Utzarich lahakir at hakpeda shelo. He does have to recognize the things he's makpid about. V'lo yityamer lakshov she'eno margish behem. And he shouldn't fool himself to think he's not feeling them. O shebeklal eno makpid, or he's not makpid at all. Ki zeh haya me'id rak al oivei tivo. That's a person of thick nature that's not in touch with himself. V'lo al mida tova. That's not a good character trait. Nislamed efa, we have to practice lamod b'birur, to establish clearly alakpeda shalano, on the things we're makbid about. V'zos b'meshek zman must speak. We have to work on this for a while. Ad shenamod aleim v'alahekif shalem, that we should establish them and their range. So tomorrow we're not having Musa, we're having a celebration. I think Rav Herenstein's he finished Mesilas Yesharim. They're having a siyum here. I finished Seder Nezikin and Mishnayos. So we're gonna have a little bit of a siyum tomorrow, and we'll continue Wednesday. I'm back saying Shmuzim, so it's Wednesday. Yeah.